Welcome to The Business of Engineering, the new podcast from Element 14, the world's largest online community for makers, engineers and tech professionals. In this series, we're going to be talking to entrepreneurs and business leaders about some of the challenges and opportunities involved with working in the tech sector. I'm John Lucas, and I'm happy to be joined today at the NatWest Business Accelerator by Alistair Maiden, CEO of Ciecko, Tracey Dawson, MD of Daletech Electronics, and Ryan Ciecko, Partnerships Manager at Free Agent. Today we're talking about partnership management. From brand partnerships to working with suppliers, partnerships can be an essential part of a business growth cycle. Today's guests all have extensive experience in this area. So first up, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Sure. My name's Ryan Ciecko. I'm a partnerships manager with Free Agent, and we are a fintech cloud-based accounting software platform.
I'm Alistair Maiden. I'm the CEO of Ciecko, which is a legal engineering business. We help law firms and corporate legal teams to buy and implement legal technology.
I'm Tracey Dawson. I'm the Managing Director of Daletech Electronics. We are a manufacturing company based in Leeds. We manufacture low volume, high quality, niche electronic products.
So, first of all, what makes a good professional partner in your opinion?
I think it really depends on the context. So I think you know there isn't unfortunately a cookie cutter approach to picking the right partner. But if there were some consistencies throughout, it would be the really one consistency that jumps out to me is trust.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I think any kind of partnership or supply relationship that I get into, I always advocate, and I used to be before I set up my company. I was a head of contracts for Asda. I'm a lawyer by trade. And in any kind of contractual arrangement, I always advocate a nuclear button, which would enable either party to get out of the relationship if that trust is breached.
Completely agree, and I think there has to be somewhat of a common objective or strategic alliance between the two in order to achieve common goals, like I said.
Yeah, I think it's really important that whatever partner you pick understands where you're going, what your vision is, what your core values are, and that they're aligned. Problems start to arise when you're not on the same page.
Exactly.
You know, integrity is absolutely key, isn't it? And honesty. Mm-hmm. And the trust.
So if you can think back to when you were kind of looking for your first kind of business partnerships kind of early in your careers, what kind of things were you looking to get out of them at that point?
For me, it's an interesting one because with my legal background, I've often been in the position of actually kind of facilitating other people's business partnerships. So I've seen hundreds, if not, in fact, when I was at Asda, I personally approved 1,000 contracts, which gives you an idea of how many business partnerships I've seen. And I think what I would always say in terms of what I'm looking for and what I'm looking for now is clarity as to what exactly is happening in this relationship. And I think there's a great tendency of people to dive into micro detail about things and start negotiating, you know, things of, I guess, relatively limited importance before they establish the fundamentals on which the relationship is based. So most partnerships, I think, should be capable of summary and maybe 10 bullet points, but you know, often when you dive into it, you find that it's not the case.
I would agree, but I also think you shouldn't leave any grey areas.
Sure.
You know, although you're going into a partnership looking for a positive outcome, you should also recognise that might not happen. And as you said, you know, a nuclear button that if anything goes wrong, and to close the loop, to make sure everybody knows each partner knows what the responsibility is and what's expected, and there's absolute clarity around that.
It's interesting actually, because one of the key things that Ciecko does now is we help particularly corporate legal teams. So we work for Unilever and Royal Mail and various other, you know, big corporate organisations, several banks as well. And we help them to put in place these kind of, I guess we call them contract management systems. And key part of that is essentially getting business users, so people, commercial people within an organisation, to articulate the deal that they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we hear back from our legal team customers again and again and again is typically when a commercial person comes to us with a deal, they've kind of done bits of the deal, but not the whole thing. And maybe 70% of the deal, typically the boring stuff like payment terms and payment dates and, critical milestones and that kind of boring, but also possibly during a negotiation, slightly potentially adversarial stuff doesn't get discussed up front. But obviously that's what typically causes problems later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We manufacture electronics, so we bring components into the building, manufacture the product, and out it goes. So it's absolutely vital that the components we buy are from trusted distributors, actually, and Premier Farnell's are one of our major suppliers. And one of the reasons we have a partnership arrangement with them is because of the trust, the reliability. I know that the components are going to come in. We've got a great pricing structure with them as well, which obviously helps. But that whole, making sure the whole agreement is in place and we know what we will get, delivery on time, we know that the price is going to be good, we know that the components are going to come from the right places. There's, especially in our industry, there are a lot of grey suppliers, grey market suppliers. So that means that the components are not necessarily coming in from where they should. You don't have that trusted source. Because we're manufacturing the niche products, our customers absolutely depend on us to produce, manufacture high quality products. So, there's a lot about making sure that the suppliers and partners that we have are trusted.
Completely echo that. From a free agent perspective, we really have two channels within our partnerships, and it's either commercial partnerships or more technical integration partnerships. And on that side in particular, we need to be able to have that trust between us and those integration partners, because they're going to be working with our end users, and we need to ensure that what they're offering is going to complement the platform that we have our users based on. Also, that the consistency in the offer and that product is going to be there throughout the partnership.
Yeah.
You mentioned a lot there about the negotiations and the need for this kind of trust and mutual understanding. A lot of the times, particularly if you're a startup, if you're negotiating a partnership with a larger company, how do you manage to negotiate that kind of almost imbalance of power when you're working with a much bigger fish than yourself? That maybe, how do you make sure that you are able to keep an even keel on the negotiations and make sure you're making the right decision?
So I think my first piece of advice would be get realistic. So you're going to be using their paper, their standard contract, and my approach is always I do ask the question, so I do ask for changes, but I'm also realistic about our relative negotiating position. So I think about the things that could really hurt us, and I think about things like are they obliged to pay us, for example? How quickly are they obliged to pay us? And I think about things like, this is going to get a bit legalistic, but, what's the cap on our liability? So what's the worst that could go wrong? Yeah. Could a claim potentially ruin our business, and that kind of thing. But I'll limit my requests to things that are absolutely necessary.
I agree with you. You have to be realistic and understand that you are the smaller fish, but also be very bold. If you have a product or a company that you believe in and you have a vision for, then be absolutely bold, because you have that confidence that you're in the right place, you're in the right space, and this is the right partnership.
Yeah, I agree. Be bold, definitely. When I'm negotiating, particularly pricing, actually, say the kind of non-legal stuff, the more commercial stuff, pricing, I think you've just got to say, if you deliver a quality product or service, you've just got to say, look, that is the price,
You see, it's not very British, is it? We don't like that. We just sort of steer quite away from price. It sneaks in at the end. And I've just... over the years I've just learned, let's talk about price first. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's going to be one of the most awkward sticking points. So and I'd always ask for discount again and again.
Do that actually,
don't ask,
that actually makes
Correct.
me say, Someone asked me last week, we were talking about trust, and someone asked me last week, and it's actually someone from overseas, said, have you ever had to sack a client? And I said, no, but we did kind of try to in a very British way, which is we just doubled the price. So I just wrote to them and said, the price is now double. And unfortunately,
and crossed your fingers.
No, they just engaged us more. So I don't know. I mean, it didn't
But
really
it's not
work.
quite. It doesn't hurt quite as much
No.
if they're paying
Yeah,
twice.
And it was just a bit of a shock.
A bit of a shock, yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
You've learned. You'll
Yeah.
triple next
Exactly.
time.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, but I totally agree with the comment about half of our customers are overseas, and
Okay.
one of the things I've learned is critically important is cultural sensitivity.
Completely.
So I was in Dubai last week, for example, where it's inappropriate to shake hands with women unless they offer to shake hands first.
Oh,
And
interesting.
that was a big problem for me. I was kind of having to restrain my right hand. So
Yeah.
in meetings
It's very
with
British, isn't it?
with my left, yeah.
Yeah.
And also, actually, so Asda, where I used to work, is part of the Walmart group. And we always used to say, so Walmart's in Bentonville, Arkansas, in the south. And we always used to say to new recruits, they speak the same language, but you've got to understand there are massive differences.
Completely.
So, for example, it's fair to say that in the legal world in Yorkshire, people are fairly potty-mouthed, and they can, they drop a few f-bombs. But in Walmart, that's a sackable offence. So you really have to be. That's a great
Culturally
example.
I
aware.
didn't know that.
Yeah,
I
that
think,
cultural
yeah.
awareness
Yeah.
is really important. And actually, even within the US, my external perception is New York's like a different country. San Francisco and California has its own thing going on,
Very much so.
It's really quite different.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I guess that does touch on quite an important point, is that sometimes if you are partnering particularly with a bigger company, you might very well be working with overseas, so it's not necessarily going to be a face-to-face relationship all the time. So how do you kind of manage that kind of need for communication and also kind of retaining flexibility when there might be time zone issues or not, people might not get back to you as quickly as you'd like, that stuff like that?
Well, I think it's much easier now, isn't it? There's so much tech. It's really not an issue. Years ago, it would have been an issue. You'd have to sit up and wait, and that's not necessarily the case now, because we can all use our laptops and phones and whatever other device you need to. And I think that flexibility, I think British culture has changed massively, so I think we're becoming much more flexible, and we're starting to embrace the fact it's not a 9 till 5 day. And I think you have to, once you start to look at partnerships in different cultures and overseas, then you have to also adapt that flexibility. Sure. And be as agile as you can possibly be, because there will be time zone differences and there will possibly be cultural differences, etc. So you need to embrace that and understand that.
I mean, just even looking at my day-to-day, so we have a lot of customers in Asia, so I was up working on Skype at 6. I use WhatsApp a lot, actually, for customer communication, just because it works very well, and it's encrypted, of course. And then I play golf for an hour at 9 and then stop. And I'll probably be working this evening as well, and obviously doing this. And, the kind of standard day template is just being ripped up.
Absolutely. Especially when you're a startup or you're a scale-up.
Yeah.
You have to be hungry.
You need to be very hungry and have the passion. Just have the passion.
Yeah, and I think you can accommodate the odd hours, through that. I
It's
actually
part of
love
the enjoyment,
I love
isn't
doing
it?
Yeah, I love it. I think the other thing as well is that with regards to technology. So, firstly, I think that being able to chair a conference call using Skype or WebEx is a vastly underrated skill. So because of course, what you're having to do is chair a meeting where you can't see anyone, so you don't have those visual clues. So you just the method of dealing with that is quite. So I did a pitch for a big potential deal yesterday. The video didn't work, so I couldn't see them, so I was having to kind of pitch blind, and it went fine. But I do think that that's through practice, and I think people don't train it, and perhaps they should.
Well, it's new technology, isn't it? And,
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of these areas that is all new and we're learning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if anyone wants an idea for a startup,
Yeah.
that's probably a good one.
Maybe we should do that.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing that occurred to me, actually, I guess it's the same theme. We recently took on, we've got a partnership with the University of Manchester, and I'm just about to start lecturing there. And through that, we've just taken on a part-time basis, some final year students with a view that when they graduate, it's kind of like an apprenticeship, but and as part of the test we gave them, we made them pretend that we were a potential customer and pitch our business, so Ciecko, to us via Skype.
Oh, interesting.
Because, realistic, that's what you need to be able to do in our business. We do face-to-face as well, but those kind of skills are really important. And you know what? The thing that was really heartening was, they're obviously children of technology, and they just absolutely aced it in a way that we're...
And I think there is a lot of that.
Yeah.
We're finding that with our younger staff.
Yeah.
They use WhatsApp. They don't want to use emails.
No.
Sure. There's just an adoption, isn't there,
Sure.
of tech, and they're looking for innovation. And engineers particularly should be looking for innovation anyway.
Absolutely. Particularly in a startup, in a smaller growing company, when it comes to that point when you might be looking at a partnership, be it for supplier exclusivity or some kind of brand extension, etc., how would you go about seeking out, making those connections and seeking out somebody who's going to be a suitable company to meet the needs that you've got at that time?
So we're a services business, so I've always taken the approach of so many seeds. And, I've always tried to get out there as much as possible, not just to events where you might try and pick up customers, but where you might try and pick up suppliers and partners as well, and be open-minded to that. Try and see as many products as possible. Try and understand what people are doing. It's a funny thing actually, though, that the things like LinkedIn and the availability of information now means you can almost be sometimes too open. There's too much information. There's too, it's kind of too easy to find out what's going on. And I sometimes find myself, turning that
lost in a jungle.
Yeah.
I think you have to be pretty focused, don't you? Because you're right. There's too much information. I think you need to be really clear what you want, and then research. And don't jump into anything too quickly. Just, research until you're absolutely focused and you know who you want to partner with. Because then you can go after them. Do not, for me, don't do a scattergun. Although I agree with you, get out there and understand your industry and understand what you're trying to achieve, understand your competitors and your suppliers, and then have a very focused approach at exactly who you want to partner with. I think you need to approach it in that sort of positive way, not please will you partner with me?
Sure.
It's definitely a much more defined, focused strategy.
I think there's also merit in kind of building your network organically, and joining those trade unions and joining those associations that could potentially tap you into those audiences that are going to lead to those supplier relationships and those potential partnerships.
But you always, I think, there's also a tendency though, you can also get sort of carried away by it, and you need to be asking yourself constantly, what have I got from this? Mm-hmm. Was this useful, or did I just have a cup of coffee?
Definitely. Yeah, having some calls to action as a result. And
was that a useful space to be in? And I agree with you, there's a lot of soft touches that you can't possibly quantify, but you've got to make sure they're useful.
I always think that there is some kind of, how to describe them, probably like exceptional individuals who I really trust.
Influencers.
Influencers who I would go and say, what do you think of these guys? And,
Sure.
or could you recommend someone in this sector for me? So I found it really useful to have, I guess, informal partnerships with people who are in the same industry as me, but not in exactly the same space. So they're not like direct competitors. And just being able to say, have you ever done this before? Or have you heard of someone who does this? That's really helpful.
Yeah, it is. And I am really big on collaborating with our competitors. And they find it very difficult. Some find it very, very difficult. But I'm not in the same space, and in that I'm not going after your customers, but it would be useful to collaborate. I think it's much more than it used to be. And maybe it helps because I'm a woman, because I naturally think collaboration is the way forward. So
open innovation of sorts, it can lead to at least open
absolutely.
Innovation, for
sure. And I'm quite happy to work with much bigger competitors, or talk about new technology, or where they can see markets are going. I think that's really important, but I also recognise it's a difficult door to open.
I've got some partners who I buy services from, I sell services to, and I also compete with them. It's quite quite complicated. Sometimes. So I think I guess that goes back to the original point on trust. You have to keep.
And it's one of the reasons actually we don't manufacture our own product. Because so that we don't actually compete with our customers. We just will, as long as the product has electronics in, it doesn't matter about the industry, then we can get involved.
Do you not think if you're quite niche, then you can find yourself in the situation I've just described, though, can't you? Because because these bigger organisations kind of do, these big global corporations. I'm thinking like the PwCs and the Accentures. Sure. They kind of do everything. So we quite often find ourselves, they're potentially a customer, they're potentially a supplier, they're potentially, and
you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I think the beauty of being a smaller organisation is the flexibility and the agile way you can respond. And I hope we never lose that. So although we're on a massive growth trajectory, and actually I have a very good working relationship with Premier Farnell, and their business model is such that they really have a flexible approach to customers. And I asked to go round to see, because it's a massive organisation, and the distribution warehouse is just enormous, but they've still been able to retain that flexibility. So I have a personal contact. So it's really interesting that if you can still maintain that, but I'm not sure that many people understand how to.
And when it comes to that, you touched briefly on this kind of idea of kind of trade unions and professional bodies, etc. Now that we do live in a world where it's so much easier to just go to networking events or research on LinkedIn, is there still a place in terms of fostering those partnerships with these professional bodies that you might want to join? And if so, which ones would you join and recommend?
I'm very careful about the bodies, so I wouldn't join just for the sake of it. So, for example, I wouldn't join certain organisations that are regionally limited, or it has to have added value. So for me, we're part of the EF, which is the manufacturers organisation, and it's a national body, and they have links to the House of Westminster, and I'm getting legal backup. They know what's happening in our industry. And that's really, I'm just very focused, because otherwise you can join a whole host of things. And you can go out and have coffee most mornings, but it hasn't brought us any value. So I think it has to be linked to your own industry, be relevant, and offer added value.
So if I look at our business, so I've already mentioned we're affiliated with the University of Manchester, and that's a great, I think that hopefully that works both ways. But it's really interesting because it gives us exposure to great young minds, to new emerging technologies potentially, and that kind of international aspect as well. From their perspective, they get the benefit of us giving practical guidance about how the legal market is developing. So that's great. Obviously we have an affiliation with the Law Society as well, but I would say, I think the problem with that is, potentially it's kind of so broad and so big and covering so much that, we're a small part of that, so we kind of need to be a little bit more focused. I'm also affiliated with something called IACCM, which is a bit of a mouthful. It's the International Association of Contract and Commercial Managers. That's a really interesting group because it's international, as you said. It literally has different regions. I'm doing a workshop for them at they've got a Madrid conference in May. And that's quite interesting. And I think you've got to, if you are going to be involved, you need to think carefully about how you're going to be involved. See, I'm, doing that without charge. Obviously, I'm passing on, that's the kind of thing that we would normally charge for, but it will give me a lot of exposure to, potential partners, potential customers, potential suppliers as well. So just being there. And I find the thing that I find really, really worthwhile is the drinks or the lunch afterwards.
Sure.
And that's where people might have the confidence at that point to come up to you,
open up a bit.
That's where you really, so I think just you've got to, as you said, just be really careful about, you've got to think, am I getting something out of it? How does it work?
Sure. Most definitely. I think there's that need to kind of evaluate who you're approaching in that sense. And as you said, Alistair, regarding just having that exposure and being around like-minded individuals who could potentially open doors for you. Something we've done at Free Agent in our commercial operations team is also look at the co-working spaces. I mean, these are huge opportunities for particularly a software like ours to be able to tap into communities of freelancers and small startup businesses, to be able to educate them not only on our platform, but also relevant content that's going to benefit their community, and it's almost that give and take. So it's not just what are you going to be able to get out of that relationship, but what can you give back, and I think that tends to help.
I think
as well.
it has to be a reciprocal arrangement, and I'm chair of the Leeds Manufacturing Alliance, so we organise the Leeds Manufacturing Festival, which has been phenomenal because it's opening the doors of manufacturing companies to young people. And I'm really passionate about that, but I think you have to have that passion, don't you? And understand your industry and want to be involved in it, and then everything else will follow. I think if you don't have that focus and understanding, then you can waste your time.
I found something astonishing, actually. I mean, without wanting to be negative, but there was...
I'll try not to.
There was so we worked for one very, very big international organisation, and I remember I was speaking at a conference, saw a lawyer who also acts for that organisation was on the delegate list of the conference, but didn't see him at the event. And obviously, I said to him afterwards, so I thought we could have had a quick chat, and he said yeah, but he didn't make the most of that opportunity. And I kind of felt I often feel at these events, like, why are you here? There's a lot of people who just turn up.
I was just going to say that you see the same faces and think, really?
Yeah. What's the point in this?
Well, probably because they've been paid a wage, and they don't really have to worry about the startup or the scale up or the income streams. Where
and it's just a couple of days away from the office.
Yeah, whereas we're on a different journey.
Picking through the weeds.
Yeah.
But business travel isn't that much fun, is it?
No, it isn't. No. It's a bit miserable and it's a bit lonely.
Yeah.
After the initial, oh, great.
Yes.
And then it's, oh, really? Again?
Just to return quickly to the legal kind of stuff we talked about earlier as well, if you're working with a bigger company again, and if you don't necessarily have access to an enormous legal team in the sense that a larger company might be, what advice would you give to companies to make sure that they know their rights before they enter into a partnership and during that contract negotiation stage, if they don't necessarily have the resources to hire a whole legal team to scrutinise everything with a fine-tooth comb?
Well, first of all, I would say read the contract. Because it's amazing how many people don't do that. And
but also, Alistair, don't you think not just read it, understand it?
Yeah,
because for you it will just be a natural way of speaking, or
it's a different language.
For me,
Yeah.
I understand why people don't read contracts.
Yeah, I totally get that. And I think even if it's not clear, have a go at understanding it would be the thing. And
highlight.
And what are the key, think about what the key things are. So in any contract, I'd be thinking, okay, well, what exactly do I have to provide? Or, if I'm buying, what exactly am I getting for my money?
Okay.
What exactly do I have to pay, or what am I being paid? When am I being paid, and when do I have to pay? When is it going to be delivered? You mentioned that earlier. It's amazing, actually, in years of, I guess, managing contracts, helping businesses prevent disputes. Most disputes relate to those limited points that I just mentioned. They don't relate to the complex legalese and the other parts of the agreement.
Could I just ask you though, especially when you're talking about scale-ups and startups and people like me who can't be bothered to read a contract, would you always advocate a formal contract as opposed to an informal contract? Because it's very easy as a startup or a scale-up business that you meet somebody, you can do business with them, you like the way they trade, you have some trading history, and suddenly there's almost a partnership has been formed without formality.
Yeah.
Would you advocate that, or do you think that there needs to be a formal process in place?
See, if I look at my own business, we haven't got a formal contract in place for everything, which I'm sure some of the people that I've advised over the years would laugh at me if I to call me a hypocrite. But we do, on a basic level, I would always recommend an email stating those key points. What are we getting?
Get it in
what are we
writing
paying?
somewhere.
When is it happening? Those things need to be covered. That actually, the law, the common law and the law relating to contracts is fairly comprehensive. So that will apply to an informal contract anyway. So you will actually have rights even if you don't have a formal contract in place. And those rights are, I think they adopt a reasonably balanced position which protects both buyer and seller. So I'm always quite comfortable with that kind of informal contract, as long as those key points that people fall out over, what, how much, when,
and have an email just covering off those points.
Yes, I think my exception would be where you perceive that there is a significant risk. In a startup context, I'm just thinking about your business, that might be, potentially intellectual property and people ripping you off effectively.
Sure. Okay.
In your context, it might be that also, but also a key thing for us is non-solicitation. So what that means is if we're going to start working with you in partnership, don't steal our employees and we won't steal yours.
Sure.
That's a really key. I'm just about to send someone on secondment for 9 months to a bank. I did have to have the conversation and insist on it being in the contract that they won't hire her at the end of the period because, that's talent that we've developed.
Yes,
sure.
You're not going to give it away.
Yeah.
Now, is there NDAs involved in that process as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Although, don't get too het up on NDAs because in my entire legal career, I've never been involved with enforcing one. So,
Gosh, interesting.
And I've never heard of anyone.
All our customers insist on NDAs.
Yeah.
I've got piles and
I wouldn't be too. So with an NDA, as a rule of thumb, I would always insist on it being mutual, so not one way.
Sure.
And then I would have a quick look at it and check whether any provisions aren't mutual, and those are the ones that you probably need to be focusing on.
Okay.
Again, when it comes to this kind of contract negotiation and this need for trust between different businesses, obviously without naming any names here if you don't want to, but has there been a time when you've had to either withdraw from a contract negotiation or terminate a partnership entirely, and what did that kind of look like for you and what impact did it have on your business?
I'm in the middle of one now.
As are we. Yes, we're going through an entire partnership evaluation process at this stage. Free Agent was recently acquired by RBS NatWest, and so we're now looking to bring some features in-house into the platform, and so that causes that knock-on effect of having to then reevaluate which partnerships are already in place, and seeing which ones are most productive, most conducive moving forward with our strategy. But yeah, it's never a difficult bridge to cross.
In a scale-up business and a small business, you need to evaluate worst case scenario, as you said, in terms, not just in terms of risk to the business per se, but also to the risk to the culture of the business. It's not just based around the financial risk, it's also based around the risk to the future of the business, i.e. the growth trajectory or
reputation.
And you need to be making sure that whatever partnership you're involved with adds value to both parties, I guess, but You need to be very selfish about that. And I think when you start to extricate yourself from a partnership that isn't working, it's painful. And you have to take a deep breath and get on with it and focus on what's good for my business. What is the best way forward? Take all emotion out of it. Because it always becomes emotional, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I was going to lead on to that point. I mean, one of the challenges that we've had is where personnel within a big organisation have changed. And just reflecting as you were talking, I think the moment in a partnership where, you know, you're thinking about something when you're in bed, you know, you're thinking about an individual, they annoy you when you wake up in the morning. Every time it's like a cheese grater in your brain, you know. And I've got a policy, I wrote a post on LinkedIn that got quite a lot of hits about I've got a no dickheads policy. So I don't tolerate any dickheads in my life, basically, and that extends to business and my personal life. And you know, that can be quite tough at times because you have to be quite frank with people and say, you know, I'm sorry, but this isn't working. But life is better without dickheads. They're so disruptive.
You've got to do it quicker rather than later. As soon as you know it's not working, jump on it. Don't hope it's going to get better, because it really won't. And ultimately, you're dealing with people. You know, regardless of whether it's an organisation, there's people within that organisation. Don't assume they'll behave in the same way that you will. Never assume that, because that only adds to your frustration. Assume people will behave in a very bad way, and then it's just very nice if they don't.
In terms of those kind of moments when you have to withdraw a relationship or a relationship goes south, what kind of are some of the red flags you think to watch out for along the way that a relationship might not be right for your company?
What I'm always remind my team of is the Mark Twain quote, where he said, "Don't argue with idiots. They'll drag you down to their level and then beat you with their experience." And I think that is the best.
Absolutely perfect.
You know,
absolutely.
It is just best to just avoid that situation if you can.
And I think on any situation where it's gone wrong, you look back and you think, "What? I remember. I should have seen that flag." As soon as you get that warning, this doesn't feel right. That shouldn't have. I just don't like that. Stop it immediately. Do not continue.
And I think that's going back to that point about trust again. It's about trust. You know, as soon as that's damaged, it's
all
hard
over
to repair.
Especially when you're in it, you know, especially when your business is based on honesty and integrity, and we want to work with nice people. You don't want to be looking over your shoulder all the time and checking that everything's okay. You just want to enjoy life as well. It's really important. So reiterating, if the alarm bells start, just
listen to them well.
Listen to them, because something's not quite right.
Okay. Well, to kind of pivot to a more positive kind of conversation, can you give any examples of a time when a partnership has worked out really well for your company and really benefited your company, and how did that kind of look?
In the early days of our company, I know that obviously we started as a bookkeeping app, and that was the sole purpose. But then obviously as our user base grew, that's when we knew we needed to start bringing in more partnerships to be able to access a wider audience, but also to build out our platform in functionality purposes. So we've worked with the likes of Receipt Bank and PayPal, which have been terrific large organizations that help to streamline some of our functionality as a young fintech startup. And then through those, it's exposed us to a much larger audience and given us a much larger end user base.
Actually, Premier Farnell have proved fantastic working partners. They support the company. We've worked with them for too many years, a long time. But really interestingly, that we always go back to them because they supply on time, they supply great product, we've got instant contact, they have a very good system, internal system, so even with accounts. And even as a big organisation, I've found them really flexible. So there have been times in the past where we've had to say, actually, I don't know whether we can can we pay you in another 15 days or whatever, and they've allowed us to do that. And it sounds a bit sycophantic, but the truth is they are one of our most important as partners, because we need this reliability, we need the high quality products, we need to be able to pick the phone up and ask somebody to help us, and we've got that help immediately. They've got fantastic technical support. So they have really enabled, or certainly helped us to go on this very strong growth trajectory, and have been there all the time. So that's one of my great working partnerships.
Oh, the boss will love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm not lying.
No, great.
I was interested about, earlier you were talking about when you've collaborated with competitors, and you're smiling, so it's obviously been a positive.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
how about that? What are the constituent elements there? That's
I
interesting.
think the basis really comes from, particularly in Leeds, there are over 1,800 manufacturing companies.
Yeah.
Employing over 23,000 people.
Yeah.
You can tell I was involved in the Leeds Manufacturing Festival.
Yeah.
But we don't have a big name. We don't have a Rolls-Royce or etc. So it's very underplayed. But manufacturing is enormous in this region, and I genuinely believe there can be more obtained from collaboration than not. And I think men of a certain age perhaps don't appreciate that as much, but the younger generations absolutely understand that. And I when you're collaborating with a software house, and it just feels so much better to have a good working relationship.
Yeah.
Everybody can benefit from that, can't they?
Yeah. Well, a point of interest, say we went out to an awards ceremony in San Francisco, and at that ceremony there were a lot of legal operations directors from big American companies, with massive legal buying power, and the message from those organizations was very clear to their suppliers: we expect you to collaborate. It's not an optional thing anymore. We expect you to collaborate, to share knowledge, to share technology, to for our benefit. One of the things that kind of got me into this actually is when I was working in-house as a lawyer for a corporate organisation. One of the things we did is make a software platform available to all of the law firms that we instructed as a kind of common method of working. And it's really interesting because, at first you could tell they were a bit they didn't like it. I'm not keen on this, and maybe it was a bit kind of there's some dinosaur attitudes, I think, but they soon got into it, and now it's just the way that they do it. And it does benefit. There's a difference between cooperation and collusion, isn't there?
Yeah.
I think so.
And maybe as we move forward, maybe partnerships will be formed in a much more informal way, as you've suggested. Just an email, just setting it out. This is what we expect from you, and this is what I will do for you. Done. Yeah. And I hope it comes to that. But I think you're right, even when we're collaborating and it creates a partnership, just to cap it off is always useful, isn't it?
Well, thanks guys, that was a very interesting discussion. If you'd like to hear more from this, please go to element14.com. You can find more episodes of the Element 14 podcast available on all good podcasting platforms, including iTunes, Stitcher and Acast. Element 14 is the world's largest online community for engineers, makers and tech professionals, so please visit element14.com/community for more information. And for you guys, if our listeners would like to hear more about your companies or yourselves, where can they find you?
So my name's Ryan Ciecko. I'm a partnerships manager with FreeAgent, a cloud-based accounting software platform. If you're interested in learning more, log on to freeagent.com and you can find out about different functionality and pricing structure.
Daletech we're based in Yorkshire, and we have a really open policy. So if we can help you, if you've got any problems, just ping us an email. We'd be more than happy to talk about manufacturing products, but equally we're also there to help with any technical issues.
So it's www.ciecko.tech, note psych, not sky, which is a common.
I didn't think of that.
Common,
yes, absolutely.
common. Yeah, and also I'm fairly responsible on LinkedIn. In fact, most of our customers get in touch with me that way. So we're open. I think any business benefits from kind of legal engineering, legal process engineering, just getting their contractual and legal processes in order. So please just get in touch.
And you can find all the information about today's guests in the show notes. I've been John Lucas for the Element 14 Business of Engineering community, and you can join us next month for another discussion on something else related to business and technology. Thank you very much. Bye.
Yes, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.